Hey guys, what's up and welcome back. Today we're going to do a replay review. I've got a TvT here that I want to show. It's basically a standard double gas opener into Mech gameplay, and we've kind of found our build that we want to use to get into Mech. So here we are, it's 2025 Season 3. The new patch hasn't come out yet. Our win-loss is 146 and 130. We've definitely been as high as #1 in the league, but we've kind of been messing around just a little bit. Like, our MMR is usually pretty stable in the 3300s. I've gotten all the way up to high 3400s, one or two games away from the Diamond 2 promotion. But then when I'm just grinding out like a bunch of games during a day, tend to kind of like play 100 MMR underneath probably what my stable ranking would be. In terms of race report, we've got 41% against Protoss, 60% against Terran, and 56% against Zerg. The TvT win rate is slightly bolstered by the handful of people that instantly quit the TvT matchup, and then also when you're playing against a random, if the random draws Terran, they might quit that as well to avoid playing the mirror match. So that's kind of where we are with the season. And then in terms of the game here, it's this game on Tokamak, I believe. And the reason I want to go over this is because I've been looking for the build to follow to get into Mech, right, when playing TvT. And what I've found is if you skip Marines, you are very susceptible to a quick tank push. 2 tanks and a Lib, 2 tanks and a Viking, 2 tanks and reactor Vikings, whatever, right? You're pretty susceptible to that. So this build is going to open 16, 16, 17 double gas, and we're not going to diverge from either the bio or the Mech build until it's time to swap off the starport. You're making Ravens, right? So typically you open 2 Reaper and a Hellion, and then you can go like Cyclone, quick swap onto a quicker Raven, or you can go 2 Cyclones into 2 Ravens, right? That's if you're not getting pushed. And then with this build, there's versions of Mech where you would do nothing with the barracks, right? And you would just make the tech lab straight away on the starport and then start going into Ravens. That's one way of doing it. Or if you have this timed out well and the Cyclone is finishing, you can swap and go to the quick Raven, right? But what I found is it's much better to have the reactor so that if you are getting quick tank pushed, you can switch the starport onto the reactor and make Vikings. Because if you're getting tank pushed, what you want to do to defend that in this version of the game is just make tank Viking, right? 1 tank and 2 Vikings at a time. Try to win the air war, and if you can win the air war, you can stop the siege push, right? So that's the adjustment we've been making. We lost a bunch of games where we basically skipped barracks production entirely outside of the 2 Reapers, went straight into tank Raven, and just got quick pushed and died, right? So here it's much, much better if we get the Marines until we're ready to do the add-on switching, right? So opponent's first harass choice is kind of odd. 2 landed Vikings is not the best version of starport harass. Looks like we lose 2 SCVs to that. Fix our saturation. And then now here's the add-on swaps, right? So instead of swapping for Stim Pack, we just swap and make 2 factories. And we can totally afford our 3rd CC. We got it after the factories instead of before. And then here comes his tank push, right? So he's got 1 tank, a handful of Vikings, Marine Medevac, and a Cyclone. He already lost 2 Vikings, right? And we didn't even use any Raven energy to hold that. which is kind of a mistake. We just used an SCV pull instead. We definitely could have used auto turrets instead of the SCV pull there. But the idea here is we're in the 3-1 setup, making Hellion Tank Viking with a double armory, 3cc, get a nice tank spread, get the third totally saturated, go up to a 5-3, right, so that you can reinforce air, and then get the rest of your upgrade facilities. And then obviously I'm missing depot production, right? But this is basically how to build a nice TvT mech army. And then this time we're going to use the Raven effectively. Anti-armor missile +2 interference matrices. He's kind of trying to base trade a little bit, but our defensive tanks just kind of hold the line there, and then we can clean up his side of the map, right? Cyclone lock-ons on the CC, siege up the natural. Opponent kind of balance winds just a little bit, which is funny because it's the mirror matchup. And then we're just going to go home and macro. And for the macro, we basically just need to fix all of our saturation, get a 4th and a 5th base, go up to 80 SCVs, get all of our upgrades, and then build the rest of our production facilities, right? So part of our macro is getting all the depots that we need. When this 4th finishes, we'll be at 200 supply, right? That one finished before that one did. And then we should be starting our upgrades here in a second. Yep. And then we can get more production facilities. So what's nice about the 5-3 setup is we're making Hellion Cyclone Tank, and then out of the starports, we want Viking, Liberator, Raven. And that's just like such a solid tier 2 composition. You don't need Thors yet. You don't need BCs yet. You can work your way into them, but I find that this composition is much more mobile than a composition that involves Thors. The Thors walk very slow, and when I'm playing with Thors, I'm tempted to play with Hellbats, but I don't like Hellbats in TvT because all of the units in the mirror matchup are ranged units, right? So there's definitely a school of thought where if you're playing with Hellbat, you can make Medivac and do Hellbat drop, but at the same time, I like just the range of the Hellion. The Hellion AoE in the straight line is still very good against Marines, in my opinion. And then when we're doing our kind of final siege push into opponent's territory, then we can kind of like siege the tanks, transform the Hellbats, land the Vikings if we need to, right? Land the Vikings. Throw down some turrets. But yeah, that's the idea, is you have a very mobile composition that can become like a really strong siege composition as well. You're going for a very nice mix of air superiority and ground superiority, right? And you've got all of the upgrade facilities, and you can go into battle cruisers if you want. You can go into Thors if you want. We're basically playing with everything except for mines and except for Banshees. And even then, like, cloak speed Banshees are definitely like an option that you can mix in. Just for my preferences, I like to keep the airball conceptually kind of simple. So that's like a good amount of Vikings, a couple of Libs, and a couple of Ravens. And then I want like a nice mix of Hellion Cyclone Tank. And then, you know, up to 80 SCVs. And at this stage in the game, you're going like 1, 2, 3 bases, right? And then on this map, you've got a really nice triangle, 4, 5, 6. And then you can break the rocks over here and kind of keep your rally over here. And then the choice is, do you want another base over here, or do you want another base over here? And then this is kind of like the backside, right? So you could put like planetary here, like 2 planetaries, and like a whole bunch of turrets, and kind of just like wall off the backside, right? and then I would say like mine this cluster out, like try to mine out like these 4 bases, and then switch over and try and mine out like these additional bases if the game is coming to that, right? But at the same time, in our level, like you should just be very comfortable trying to win the game on your 5th and 6th base, right? And then in terms of upgrades, it's pretty straightforward. It's the 333 Mech, and then on the ground we've got Blue Flame Smart Servos, so that's for the Hellions, Hellbats, and then Magfield Accelerator for the Cyclones. And the way you can do the upgrades in this matchup is early in the game when you're on the 3-1 setup, and you've got 3 factories and 2 tech labs. On a single tech lab, you can go Blue Flame plus Smart Servo. Each of those upgrades is 79 seconds, and then Magfield is 100 seconds, so you put that on its own tech lab. So on one tech lab, you got Magfield. On the other tech lab, you got Blue Flame and Smart Servos. That kind of helps out your tier like 1.5 mech units, and then the +1/+1 ground is what your tanks want. So that's how you upgrade your ground army. And then when you add additional starports, that's when you get the additional armory and fusion core. And out of the fusion core, you're going to get Lib Range and Yamato Cannon. We're skipping Caduceus Reactor. We're skipping Drilling Claws. The Widow Mines could be an option. We open the game with Interference Matrix, and we skip Banshee upgrades. We don't get any upgrades at all for Bio, because outside of the first few reactored Marines, we're not making any Marines. And then in terms of structures, 18 is the amount of supply depots that you need if you have 4 bases, which is typically when you max out. And then here we're on an 8-5. I think you can go up to like an 8-8, right? And I've seen other people play like 5 factory, only 1 reactor, and then just make as many starports as they possibly can and play TvT like that. But I'm not really a huge fan of battle cruisers and Thors because they move slowly, and that's kind of more encouraging you to play on your side of the map, which is not what I like to do. I like to try and pressure them on their side of the map. So I stick to more of this tier 2 unit composition, which in my opinion is much more mobile, right? The slowest units you have are the tanks, and you don't have to cross the map with all of your tanks. You can leave like some amount of them home, like leave half your tanks at home and cross the map with the other half of your tanks. The rest of your army composition is extremely mobile, and you don't have to siege up into a giant clump of tanks, right? You can just kind of keep on maneuvering around until you can find a siege position, right? Whoever sieges up first in TvT is the aggressor, right? So basically, if you're defensively trying to hold against a clumped up amount of siege tanks, the only thing you can realistically do is win the air war and force them to unsiege. And then when you're on offense, you want to siege up in range of a base or something that's applying pressure, like a key choke or a key position on the map. And then you're winning the air war. Plus, you don't need as many tanks as they do on the ground. You just need to force them to unsiege. And then you can shove, and you can shove a lot faster when you have Hellion Cyclone tank as opposed to just having tank, right? The Hellion Cyclone is basically replacing the Marine, and that it's allowing you to shove forward. So yeah, that's the game. The units lost. This was like an incredibly efficient match. No disrespect to the opponent. He just went like a very standard 5-1-1 setup. He probably should have gone into like a 5-2-1. All reactors on the barracks, had more Marines, but whatever. It's not criticism of opponent's playstyle. It's just to show this is the way that we're going to open safe into Bio or Mech, and we'll let the early part of the game decide whether or not we want to play a greedier playstyle, which is the Mech playstyle, or if we feel like we need to apply pressure on their side of the map earlier, then we would want to go with the Bio playstyle. So, anyway, hope that was informative. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Have a good day.